Karl Friedhoff. He's a foreign policy analyst from the Chicago Council on Global Affairs. Just a moment ago, we heard from the DPRK, our reporter there, Raphael Wober, saying that there's a senior diplomat heading to Moscow. He kind of sees that as perhaps a good sign. Do you see anything out there on the landscape, I should say, that gives you a sign of optimism or encouragement, or are we kind of just at the stalemate of this war of words, you think?
Frankly, I don't see any reason for optimism right now. It seems that both leaders are unwilling to back down, and frankly, that's been very unhelpful. I think that really overshadows what the Trump administration has achieved. It's very easy to criticize the Trump administration, and frankly, I think they deserve most of that. But when you're looking at sanctions, if you're in favor of sanctions, the Trump administration has actually achieved quite a bit. We have countries around the world that are expelling North Korean diplomats. We have China signing on for tougher sanctions that they'll hopefully implement. But unfortunately, the president cannot keep his mouth shut in so many ways. And that is really impeding relations. And it's led to this unfortunate situation where we're stumbling into a war that no one in the region really wants.
I asked an expert here last week if sanctions were going to work, and he said in a word, no. Do you feel like perhaps they will?
Well, I think we need to look at what the sanctions are supposed to achieve. If we're looking at bringing North Korea back to the negotiating table, if the sanctions are enforced well enough, I think there is that very real possibility. But are sanctions really going to kind of cripple North Korea, bring them to their knees, and then suddenly they're going to give up their nuclear weapons? Absolutely not. I think sanctions are the starting point, and they should lead into negotiations. But we have to be sure that North Korea is ready and willing to negotiate seriously.
Karl, I've been reading a lot that there are no good options. What do you think are the least worst options out there that can be pursued?
The least worst options are sanctions, and then followed on by strong diplomacy. If we're going to talk about military options, we're putting U.S. allies in the way of danger in terms of South Korea and Seoul in particular being in range of heavy artillery all along the DMZ of North Korea. Japan, of course, fears that it could be the victim of a second nuclear strike if there were to be a military conflict. And so I think we need to continue where we're at now. Sanctions followed by off-ramps, and establishing those off-ramps clearly through statements, perhaps from the president, although that seems unlikely, and then leading into, again, strong negotiations with everyone back at the negotiating table and focused on a way to limit the damage that could potentially be done.
Chart this thing out for me, Karl. I mean, if you were to give advice to Rex Tillerson or the president of the United States, what would it be?
Number one, keep the president off of Twitter. That, frankly, is not helpful, and it has not been helpful since he's been saying some of these things. His speech in front of the United Nations was also not helpful. I think we really need to focus on the fact that it is North Korea that is running afoul of international law, and unfortunately, because of the statements made by the United States, the focus is on the United States being the aggressor rather than on North Korea and its violation and its human rights abuses. We need to kind of focus on that and make sure that that is the focal point of the discussion moving forward.
Karl Friedhoff joining us from Chicago. Thanks so much.